This is the BackBone Small Business Podcast.
Hi, my name is Dave Hatt, and this is the BackBone Small Business Podcast. And we've been chatting with small business owners actually throughout North America. The podcast originally was started as a way for us to share the stories of small business owners, those of us that are crazy enough to get into small business and driven enough to maintain it. So today we have Matt MacNeil, and he owns Barden Banker, Irish Times, Penny Farthing, and Vis-a-Vis. And when you come to Victoria, you're going to wind up in one of his locations. They're great spots of myself and my wife, Cindy. We certainly have spent our fair share of time in one of your locations. Matt, welcome to the BackBone.
Thanks very much, Dave, and thanks for spending some time with your wife in our rooms.
Ask you first off, let's get a little background on you. How did you get into the restaurant business to start with?
39 years ago, after I left university, and I took a summer job. And the rest is kind of the learning curve. Been going to the school of hard knocks ever since, and I think you do have to be a little bit crazy. And I've been very fortunate to be where we are today with the help of many, including banks and people like Spencer and CIBC. But we've had 14 in the 39 years. We currently have 4. And it's been very enjoyable. We still enjoy the business.
Front line, or were you back of house when you started off?
No, I was a waiter for one night, and I was absolutely awful. I spilled an entire tray on the back of a lady and her friends. And at that same time, the owner of this hotel fired his general manager. And so I went back the next morning at 6 o'clock when he was there. And I asked him, I said, you're going to need a GM. And he said, what? You can't even carry a tray. I said, I know, but I want to learn the business. And so he said, well, it's minimum wage and the hours are long. So I said, I'll take it. And that was 39 years ago. So here we are.
Cojones it took to go from dropping a tray of drinks on somebody to say you want to be the GM is remarkable. But anyway, that's what you did. And so you're working to be groomed to be a manager of some sort. And hopefully it was going to be general manager. What were some of the things that you learned off the hop that were transferable skills to being an owner? Because it's obviously significantly different, even from running a shop as a GM to owning it.
Well, the skills for some of the owners I work for, they actually did work in the rooms. A lot of them didn't, but it was just a matter of customer service. Taking care of the guests. It's what the owners I worked for wanted, and the pennies matter. I mean, in those days, there were still pennies and nickels and dimes. It was mainly cash. There was no credit cards. Today, in one of our locations, it's 95% credit card and debit. And there's a great cost to our business to operate the way we have to today. And so the learning of the pennies mattered way back when was one of the most important lessons for me, and work for some of the guys who they used to take their little pocket knives and sharpen their pencils with them and use the inside of the, at the time, cigarette carton wrappers to do their accounting on each morning. They saved everything. And it was a tough business back then, but they made it work. They always lived in a rather nice part of town, a leafy part of town, unlike some of the pubs that they owned. They were in tougher areas, but that was okay. It really was a great learning lesson.
So at what point did you decide, was the Penny Farthing your first business you owned?
An opportunity presented itself in Calgary. And so we made the move to Calgary. And my partner at the time also owned a piece of one in Saskatoon. So I commuted back and forth to operate them and to try and build the businesses. And eventually I bought him out and had our own in Calgary. And then 2. And we ended up with 6 or 7 there, including one in Banff. And sold everything, 20 plus years ago now, to move back to the coast where we wanted to be. So yes, to answer your question, on the island, the Penny Farthing was our first one. And at that point, I still had one in Whistler I had built as well.
So now you're commuting. That's something that I own with my partner, the Wet Cleaner. We're a non-toxic dry cleaner in town. Yes. And we did have a spot in Los Angeles as well. So, I mean, commute was significant, but at the time I was kind of staying there trying to get it happening. But when you talk about multi-city businesses, how hard is that to manage?
When we got from number 1 in Calgary to number 2, be it Saskatoon, or to number 3 in Calgary, let's say, it didn't matter whether it was down the street or a different city or a different province. I had to learn how to delegate. And that was one of the biggest learning curves I had. I thought I could do it all. But as it turns out, I was rarely home for dinners. And in this business, that's quite common. And it took me a little while to figure out to hire better people, to pay them a bit more. And then you have to trust them. You put in checks and balances. We still do that today with our rooms. That never goes away. And with all 4 in Victoria being so closely located, I still operate those same principles the same way today, Dave, because you can only be in one room at a time. That's just the math. So it took me a while to figure that out, but it's gone well. I have a friend in Victoria here who has been in the plumbing business, very successful for many years. He asked me almost a year ago, he was thinking about buying the pub in his part of Greater Victoria that he grew up near. And he said, "What do you think? It's for sale, the land, the building, and everything." And I said, well, "What kind of advice do you have?" And I said, "Don't do it." And I said, "Would you recommend me getting into the plumbing business at 59 years of age?" And he said, "Well, not if you don't have an operating partner or you don't have any experience." And I said, "Well, our business is much more difficult, I think, than yours." So he pushed ahead and did it anyways. And he brought in an operating partner in his plumbing company because he wanted this pub. I know it's been difficult through COVID and there's lessons to be learned, but it's something he wanted to do. It is not easy. There's no business that's easy today. You need leverage in order to find a decent bottom line. We just need sales. We've been somewhat crimped with the 50% capacity with the rules we have right now to get those numbers back up. But we're fortunate. We've got some decent weather this time of year. The local government's given us some patio seating. But you need leverage. If you don't have big volume today, the margins have grown slimmer. You can't find the bottom line you need to operate, let alone to start one and to build them the way we like to build them.
So now, how important is it for you to partner up with suppliers, insurance companies, banks, to make sure, and credit card providers? You mentioned that specifically earlier. So if you've got 95% of your business going through credit card, that must be, numbers-wise, a pretty significant chunk of change at the end of the month. So now partnering with a group like CIBC, a bank like CIBC, do you find that helpful? Are you able to seek counsel from a gentleman like Spencer? He just popped up on the screen. Haven't even had a chance to introduce him. But are you able to work with a banker like that so that you're able to chip away and keep those nickels and dimes in your jeans?
Yes, and the advice and the help has been through this relationship for 20 years, from a personal relationship with the bank to a business relationship with CIBC, has been fantastic. And Spencer has been there in lockstep every step of the way through our growth period. And more importantly, when we needed them most, when we were shut down at the beginning of COVID. And rightfully so, but the bank stepped up. And the communication has been excellent with Spencer and his team. They continue to be there for us, and we feel very fortunate to be back open again. And so you have to have those partnerships, Dave. You just can't get along without a bank today. And I can't say enough about Spencer and his CIBC team.
So it must be the same with, say, an attorney or an accountant, where you've got people that are there. What do you look for now in an accountant to help a business owner stay afloat?
Yeah, you know what? It depends on the type of accounting you're asking for. We've got an accountant who does our holding companies for us, and different accountants that he works with that do the year ends for the businesses. But it is a team approach, and you need to be able to plan for tax planning, personal planning. You can't do without one in today's world. You can't go in blindly. And at the beginning, you need them when you're starting a business, and listen to their advice as to how to structure your company properly. It's not just a lawyer. It's an accountant that you really need to structure it properly, or you end up paying unnecessarily down the road.
So you mentioned COVID a couple times, and obviously this is the time that we live in. How much were you down when COVID first started?
We were down 100% for 10 weeks to the day. We closed on the morning of St. Patrick's Day, which is typically the way we open the spring with a head of steam and a full cooler and as much beer as you can fit online in keg rooms and a full team. It's like our two busiest Saturdays in one day is typically what you do on a St. Patrick's Day. But it really launches us into the spring and has for the 39 years I've been in this business. We have been down. Downtown is slower, I will tell you, the two on Government Street, just because there's only about 28% of people have returned to working in the core that filled those buildings, be it the federal government or businesses like CIBCs. They're working from home, and rightfully so. But that's really affected the street trade for a lot of small businesses downtown. We're better now, but we were in the first 2 weeks, it was like 70% off, 72% off, and it's the earlier weekdays. Weekends seem to be very strong, and with this weather we're now seeing, it's great. We just need 11 more Augusts to get us through to next year. We all fear when the rains come in November, it's going to be a very difficult scenario.
Are there any creative things you've implemented besides the expansion of the patio that have helped your business?
There's no magic to getting people back in. We can't, obviously, with the volume being down, there are a few places that may choose to take deep discount to get people to sit at the table and buy their product. But there has to be something left for the driver. And we're quite happy to change 4 quarters for $1 into next year and get through the long winter. We've kind of resigned ourselves to that. You can't change 5 quarters for $1, and some are willing to do that, but they won't last long. And my fear is that small business, be it retail, or food and beverage in the core, hoteliers, the smaller ones, I don't know how many will be around as we speak now this time next year. It's going to be a very difficult winter, we believe. So, we're doing things like we built the patios with product that we can take those screens and move them inside to be able to use them to separate the tables so we can increase our capacity. And they say that you either have the social distance or have the plexi or tempered screens in between. So we've designed and built them to take them apart when the rains come, move them all inside so we can get a greater capacity through the winter months.
Yeah, that's a great idea. We were just in Vancouver this past weekend, and most restaurants that we popped into had the plexi in between the tables. They even had them on some of the patios, so they were more densely populated, but they were separated by the plexi. So that's a great idea. There have been programs that have been released, and I wanted to bring on Spencer Walker from CIBC. The details around what they need, how long the process is, and what the expectation is from a financial institution as to what you want to see.
Happy to. Appreciate the opportunity. So there's a few government programs that came out and rolled through the banks. The main one, I think most small business owners were aware of, is the emergency business account. And so that was the $40,000 loan. I believe it was recently expanded to allow for most small business owners, if not all, to be eligible. The threshold is a salary threshold based on one of your tax filing forms, the T4 sum form. And so essentially you go to your online banking platform, you put in the details, and I think it's 5 to 10 business days later. Typically it was a lot. It was closer to 3 to 5. Funds were in the account. And so the beauty of that program is it's interest free. It's 25% of it's forgivable. So it's $40,000 total. If you pay $30,000 back by the end of 2022, $10,000 is forgiven. And so that's a good program that the government rolled out, I think, at the end of March, early April for business owners. The other program that is run through the banks is the Business Credit Availability Program, the BCAP program. And so that's done in concert with Export Development Canada or Business Development Corporation, which is a government agency. And so the long story short is that our bank, and I assume the other banks have the same theory, good businesses before COVID will be good businesses after COVID. And so there's obviously, if revenue turns to zero, there's a gap there to make sure that people can get through. And so both of the programs are available on very flexible terms to help finance operating cash flow during COVID. And so what the ask of our clients is just a threshold to basically build out a forecast of how much do you need to get through the next 6-8 months. We'll be able to fund that. Repayment is kind of 20 years, or it can be a revolving facility for 5. And it just to give you the access to credit. The big turning point for us, historically, it's making sure we're not giving clients too much money for them to be overburdened. Whereas at this point, it's really just making sure they have enough, which kind of turns banking a bit on its head and is a different perspective than I think any of us have taken. But some good programs on that front. The only other programs that kind of might matter is there's the wage subsidy program, which I think most people are in touch with. I've heard that is looking to be expanded as with the extension to try to get people back to work. I know some common issues for our clients have been a lot of people are incentivized to stay home rather than get back into the pubs, start carrying a tray, get back into the office, because they can earn more money doing nothing than doing something. And so as sort of the cases seem to be managed in Canada, I think that there's going to be a shift in that program as well. Obviously not run through the banks, but important and helpful to business owners.
It certainly is part of the unknown, being a small business owner and, taking on that debt. Our business isn't nearly the size of Matt's, and looking at it and saying, all right, well, now we've got debt we need to service and we got to pay the piper at some point. We did it with eyes wide open, and we worked with our accountant and with our banker and did the analysis on it. So it was helpful to figure those things out. Maybe, in signing off, out of respect of time, is there anything you'd like to share, Spencer, first off, to in terms of the podcast or in terms of what you're doing, any mandates at CIBC that are going on right now?
No, I think appreciate the opportunity to get on board, and obviously great podcast, Matt. Always good to hear a bit more of the background and the story of the pubs. Just appreciate the opportunity to help where we can, and the opportunity to continue to build the relationship and keep moving forward. Appreciate both of your guys' time. Thanks for bringing me in.
Thanks, Spencer. I appreciate it very much. And Matt, it's been good meeting you. We've never met, but I really have enjoyed the story of how you got into it. And I know it takes a lot of cojones, as I mentioned before, to do what you've done in such a cutthroat industry, in such a, as you mentioned, your first advice to your friend was don't do it, don't get into the business, but to keep doing it. Thank you. It's been nice to meet you and hear your story.
Thank you very much, and I hope you'll tap me a note when you and Cindy are heading to a patio next. I'd like to meet you both, and it takes a whole team. It takes a village, they say, and in my lifetime, in that many years, with as many people that I've worked with and partners I've had, both financial and our supplier partnerships that have been decades old, and that's the secret. You need partners. You need good partners. Nobody does this alone, so we're very, very lucky.
It's I like to say it's self-sufficiency through interdependence, right?
You're 100% right. I love that.
Yeah. It also, it also, funny enough, takes a backbone to run a small business. And on that note, thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate your time, and I'll let you know when we post this episode.
Great. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Spencer.
Thanks, Matt.
Cheers. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.